Before there were swords, there were masks. Before the first word was carved into stone, there were faces of something else, not quite human, not quite spirit, staring from behind bone, wood, and fire. The mask is one of the oldest artifacts humanity has ever created. Older than the temple, older than the throne, older even than the mirror. We find them in the dry caves of the Judean desert stone masks, dated over 9,000 years ago, carved with hollow eyes and mouths locked in eternal silence. We find them in the Sahara, painted on rock walls where the ancestors danced under stars older than language. We find them buried with the dead, placed over skulls, guarding the soul's final passage. And always they appear in the same way, not as ornament, not as disguise, but as gateway. To put on the mask was never to hide. It was to become. In the ancient world, the mask was not decoration, it was transformation. When the hunter wore the skull of the beast, he was not pretending. He was invoking, calling the spirit of the animal into himself, not for dominance, but for union, to merge the human with the more than human. When the priest carved the face of a god into wood and placed it upon his own, he was not acting. He was disappearing. In that moment, the man was gone. The god spoke through his limbs. The mask had become a vessel. This is why every early culture, no matter how far or isolated, created masks. Because the mask speaks to something primal in the human soul, the desire to go beyond the self, to cross thresholds, to touch the sacred, to momentarily step out of the skin of the individual and become something vaster. The mask was not a costume. It was a technology, a ritual tool, an interface between dimensions, and it changed those who wore it. Because in ancient rites, the moment the mask touched the face, the world shifted. It was not simply a performance, it was a rupture in reality. The person beneath became invisible. The voice changed. The body moved differently. The air around them thickened, charged with presence. This was not illusion, it was invocation. The mask called something in. Something older than memory. Something that remembered the stars before they had names. And this is the forgotten truth, that the first purpose of the mask was not art, but access. Access to altered states. Access to other selves. Access to the sacred frequencies hidden behind the veil of personality. To wear a mask was to momentarily leave the world of men and enter the world of spirits. And in that space, transformation became possible. Not through belief, not through doctrine, but through embodiment. Because what we become reshapes us. And the ancients knew, to become the God even for a moment is to carry a piece of that God forever. The mask was not a relic. It was the door. And now, as we begin to remember, we stand again before it. The question is no longer what the mask was. The question is, are we ready to wear it again? There is a moment in the ritual when the fire dims, when the chanting slows, and the silence thickens. All eyes turn to the figure approaching the center, but it is no longer the man who entered the circle. He walks differently now. He breathes with the rhythm of another world. He wears the mask. And in that moment, he is not himself. In ancient cultures across the globe, from the snow-covered forests of Siberia to the red dust of Aboriginal Australia, the mask was not a symbol. It was an invitation, an open channel for the spirit to descend. The act of wearing it was not performance. It was possession. Shamans knew this. Elders knew this. Warriors, dancers, and priests, they all entered this sacred agreement. You do not wear the mask, you become what it represents. The mask was the threshold, a ritual skin that allowed the spirit to move into form, a code that told the body to release its identity and embody the presence that waited beyond thought. In some traditions, the mask was made of wood, carved in silence, its shape dictated by visions and dreams. In others, it was made of bone or bark, adorned with feathers, blood, ash, and breath. Each material, each line, each symbol charged with intention. And when the moment came, when the mask was lowered onto the face, the old self was left behind like a discarded cloak. The voice that came forth was not the wearer's. The gestures were not rehearsed. The being that moved now was other. In Siberian shamanism, the mask might call forth the bear spirit, not just its image, but its force, its wisdom, its strength. The shaman would growl, claw, prowl, devour, and through him, the tribe would witness the raw power of nature moving among them. In African ceremonies, the Egungun dancers wore vibrant, towering masks to embody the ancestral dead. When the dancer entered the space, he was no longer a man. He was the ancestor returned, offering blessings or warnings. In the Americas, masks invoked jaguars, eagles, gods of rain and fire. The mask was the contract, a sacred agreement that allowed the divine to touch the human and the human to dissolve into the divine. And it was always temporary. No one stayed in the mask forever. That would be madness, or worse, possession. But in that fleeting space between putting it on and taking it off, the impossible happened. The spirit walked. The voice of the god thundered. The tribe witnessed a merging of worlds. And for the one who wore it, something changed forever. Because when you become the spirit, even for a breath, you carry its imprint. Its pattern echoes in your dreams. Its energy lingers in your body. Its lessons shape your path. This is what modern minds forget. We think the mask is fantasy, but for the ancients it was technology, a tool to tune the human vessel into another frequency, a bridge between matter and myth. To become the spirit was not illusion. It was transformation. It was initiation. Because once you become something greater, even once you are never small again. Before you can become the spirit, you must let your old self die. This is the secret buried beneath the silence of the mask, that every transformation begins with a disappearance. And the ancients knew this. They did not put on masks to pretend. They put on masks to vanish. Because identity was never sacred to them, it was temporary, a costume of flesh, a name borrowed from time. To enter the sacred space of the ritual, the self had to dissolve, not just physically, but energetically, psychologically, spiritually. You were not allowed to bring your name. You were not allowed to carry your roles. You could not enter the mask as a father, a daughter, a priest, a king. Only as soul, only as raw potential. And so, the process of masking was a death, not theatrical, but initiatory. In tribal rites of passage, initiates were stripped of their clothes, their titles, their memories, sometimes blindfolded, sometimes buried, sometimes taken into the dark, where the outer world no longer reached them. And when they emerged, they were masked, but not for show. The mask covered what had been shed. It signaled that the old identity was gone, that something new had taken its place. This is why the dead were often buried with masks, not to scare spirits, but to guide the soul through the great crossing. The mask became the face of the traveler between worlds, a shield from memory, a seal of passage, a declaration that this one no longer belonged to the world of the living. In Egypt, the golden mask of the pharaoh was not just funerary art, it was transformation, a face of eternity, a way for the soul to enter the afterlife not as man but as God. In Mesoamerican culture, mosaic death masks were constructed with precision and reverenced turquoise eyes staring out from eternity, guiding the spirit through the underworld. Even in early Christian tradition, the concept of putting on the new self echoes this same idea that the path to the divine requires a letting go of the personal, the small, the egoic. Because the self, as we know it, is a shell. Useful, yes, but limiting. And the mask offers a crack in that shell, a momentary annihilation, so that something ancient, something vast, something beyond personality can emerge. This is what terrifies the modern mind. Because we cling to identity as truth, we build our lives around "I am," but the mask whispers, "You are not that." You are not the voice that narrates, not the image in the mirror, not the story you've told yourself 1,000 times. You are the space behind it. And in the act of masking in that sacred covering, you finally see it. That what dies was never truly you, and what remains is what you've always been becoming. This is the death that brings life, the ritual unmaking, the sacred forgetting that allows the soul to remember. There are moments in human history when the divine descends not as light in the sky, not as a voice from the clouds, but as a face carved in wood, painted in ash, formed from clay, bone, or gold. A face that is worn not to imitate the gods, but to bring them down to earth. The mask, in its truest form, was never decoration, it was embodiment. In the temples of the ancient world, gods did not appear only in visions. They were invoked through rhythm, breath, movement, and mask. To wear the face of a god was to make the god present. In Egypt, the priests of Anubis would don the jackal-headed mask during rites of embalming. But this was not costume, this was incarnation. In that moment, the man disappeared. Anubis, the guide of souls, walked the world again, speaking, moving, judging. In Africa, the Dogon carved the face of Amma, the creator deity, into towering masks and danced them through the dust of the savannah. Villagers did not see a dancer. They saw the god moving among them in rhythm, in wind, in presence. In India, temple rituals of Theyyam and Kathakali involved painted faces and sacred masks. But these were not performances. The villagers approached the masked as divine, bowed before them, offered prayers, received blessings, because for that brief moment, the boundary had dissolved. This is the mystery of the sacred mask. It does not represent the divine, it channels it. The mask is a receiver tuned not to earthly frequencies, but to archetypal forces, and when prepared with intention, consecrated through ritual, and worn with presence, the face of the god returns. This is why so many cultures feared the mask and revered it, because it brought power too great to understand. It made the invisible walk in form. It brought the gods down not just in symbol, but in vibration. In the Americas, the Hopi Kachina masks transformed the dancers into spirits of the land, ancestors, forces of rain and fertility. Children were told, "This is not your uncle. This is the spirit itself." And in Mesoamerica, masks of jade and obsidian were worn not just by rulers, but by the gods themselves, sculpted into mythic scenes where deity and human wore the same face. Why? Because the boundary was never solid. The ancients knew something we have forgotten. The divine is not elsewhere. It waits in frequency. It responds to ritual, and it speaks through form. The mask, then, is not about hiding. It is about revealing not the personal self, but the universal presence behind all selves. And when the mask is worn with reverence, the God does not merely arrive, the God awakens through you. This is why the sacred mask is both terrifying and holy. Because when you wear it, you are not in control. You are not the source. You are the vessel. And in that surrender, something vast begins to speak. Not in words, but in presence. In a world before machines, before wires and electricity, there were other technologies. Technologies of breath, of rhythm, of symbol, of presence. And among the most potent was the mask. To modern minds, technology is mechanical. It hums and blinks. But for the ancients, technology was energetic, a tool for altering perception, shifting frequency, and reshaping reality from the inside out. And the mask was one of the most advanced of these tools. Because to wear the mask was to enter a new signal, to tune the body to another frequency, to merge form, sound, and intention into a single instrument of transformation. The ritual was never just the mask, it was what accompanied it. Breathwork, deep, rhythmic, controlled, to oxygenate the body and shift the nervous system into trance, movement, deliberate, patterned, often circular. To unlock memory stored in the body, drums pulsing in resonance with the heart, opening the threshold between dimensions. And the mask, the final seal, the anchor point for what was being called in. Together they formed a system, a sacred circuit, and when activated, something extraordinary happened. The human being became a bridge. The space between worlds began to thin. The initiate was no longer simply performing, they were being rewritten. In these rituals, time would dissolve. The dancer in the mask would no longer feel separation. They were the jaguar, the god, the ancestor, the force of the storm, or the silence of the moon. This was not hallucination. It was somatic transformation, because the body does not lie. The nervous system responds to intention, to vibration, to shape. And the mask, with its exaggerated features, its geometry, its weight and presence, did something the ego could not. It recoded the psyche. You could not wear the face of death and speak as before. You could not take on the eyes of the god and think as before. The face became a key, unlocking stored memories, repressed emotions, hidden archetypes, activating the shadow, the divine, the collective, bringing into form what had long remained unseen. This is why the mask was sacred, because it changed the wearer. It rearranged the structure of the self from within. It was not passive. It was not decoration. It was designed. Every line had purpose. Every color, every animal, every horn or curve encoded meaning. It was a visual frequency, a symbolic language that spoke directly to the soul. And the ancients knew how to read it. A spiral on the forehead to awaken vision, a slit mouth to silence the ego, a feathered brow to signal flight, intuition, ascent, a skull-shaped jaw to remind something must die for truth to emerge. This is not metaphor. This is technology, but not of silicon and steel. This was the technology of the soul. And it worked not because the ancients believed, but because they understood. That transformation does not begin in the mind. It begins in the body, in the breath, in the symbol, in the sacred mask. There is a reason the sacred was hidden, a reason why the mask, once revered across continents, was silenced. Not because it was meaningless, but because it was too powerful. Because when you wear the mask, you remember. You remember who you were before your name, before your language, before your roles. And that is dangerous to systems built on obedience, to empires sustained by fear, to hierarchies that require forgetfulness to survive. The mask does not ask for permission. It opens doorways. It calls spirits. It breaks the illusion of separation between human and God, between self and archetype. And so, the war on the mask began. When conquest arrived with sword and cross, the dancers were silenced, the drums stopped, the rituals were banned. What was once sacred was now labeled savage. In Mesoamerica, the jaguar priests who wore obsidian masks were executed. Their sacred regalia burned in public fire. In Africa, colonial regimes outlawed ancestral mask dances, calling them devilish and primitive. In Polynesia, carved spirit masks were destroyed, declared false gods by men who feared what they could not control. Even in Europe, long before the cathedrals were raised, mask rituals of the old earth religions were pushed underground. The horned gods, the veiled goddesses, the spiral dances, all erased in favor of faceless doctrine. Why? Because the mask gave power to the individual, not through belief, but through experience. It bypassed dogma. It did not require priests or scriptures. It required only breath, intention, presence. And that threatened everything. You cannot control those who remember. You cannot manipulate those who have met the divine within. You cannot enslave those who know how to become the god. So the mask had to be demonized. It became a symbol of evil, of madness, of trickery. They told us masks were lies. That truth meant showing your real face. But what they never told you is that your real face was already a mask. The ancients knew this, that the person you wear every day, the one with a name, a past, a job, an opinion, is also a kind of mask, and sometimes, to remove it, you must wear another. This paradox was too deep for dogma, too free for kings, too wild for empire. And so the temples were leveled, the sacred regalia burned, the faces of the gods buried beneath stone. But not all memory dies. Some stayed hidden in story, in shadow, in the soul. And now, as the old world begins to crack, the masks begin to stir again. Not in museums, not on stages, but in the dreams of those who remember, in the hands of those who feel something rising, in the breath of those who know. The face is not who we are, it is the gate. You don't need feathers, you don't need bone or gold or carved wood, because the true mask was never outside you. It was waiting within. In every moment of silence, in every dream that didn't belong to your name, in every instinct you were told to ignore. The ancient mask is not a relic, it is a mirror, and it lives inside your breath, your posture, your imagination. You were taught to believe that identity is fixed, that you are a singular, solid self, but this was never true. You shift every day. You change when you're angry. You change when you're in love. You change when you dream. And deep within that flux is a doorway not into fiction, but into deeper truth. The mask is not about hiding. It is about permission. Permission to embody the part of you that society denied. Permission to speak with the voice you buried. Permission to step outside the skin of your daily self and become something more. Carl Jung called it the persona, the face we show the world. But behind it, he said, lies the shadow, and deeper still, the self, the archetypal whole, waiting to be remembered. And the ancients knew this long before psychology gave it words. They walked into sacred spaces, they closed their eyes, they breathed differently, and they became. They let the voice of the ancestor speak. They let the goddess move through their limbs. They allowed the mask to call forth what was hidden, not to deceive, but to reveal. Because within each of us there are many faces, and not all are meant to stay buried. So what does it mean to awaken the mask today? It means reclaiming ritual. It means allowing your body to move without explanation. It means creating a sacred space not outside, but within, where truth is allowed to wear new shapes. It means art that transforms. It means meditation that becomes embodiment. It means dance, breath, stillness, not as escape, but as return. The return of the soul to itself. And if you choose to work with a physical mask, do so with reverence. Carve it, paint it, sit with it in silence, ask it what it wants to reveal. Do not wear it for attention, wear it to listen, to become, to dissolve. Because when the mask meets the soul with intention, the world shifts. You speak differently, you remember differently. You move through time not as a name, but as a current. This is the ancient gift, not a disguise, not a performance, but a key to unlock the forgotten chambers of being, to awaken the parts of you that were never lost, only waiting. Because the most powerful mask is the one you wear when no one is watching, the one that lets you step beyond yourself and remember what you truly are. Not a face, not a story, but the presence that moves through them all.